Welcome to the Break Free Creativity Show. My name's Alex Inchbald. I'm an extreme artist and creative mentor, and I work with some of the leading organizations in the world to help them unleash their creativity. I also paint in extreme locations all over the world to explore whether it's possible to be creative everywhere. I'm joined this evening by Cynthia Rennie, who is, well, she is so many different things. She is the gem expert. Cynthia, I'm really looking forward to talking to you about so many different things over the next hour. Before we do that, let me give you a short introduction for those who don't know Cynthia. Cynthia is the gem expert, the colored gem expert.
Yes.
Cynthia is, she travels around the world finding gems for you. She is a geologist, so she knows the origins of the rocks that she chooses. She's also a jeweler, so she makes the jewels, she polishes the jewels, and she's also a designer. Wow, your jeweler all in one, the colored gem expert. Joining us from the United States, Cynthia, it's a genuine pleasure to have you on the show.
I'm so happy too. You get me so excited. Just even posing the question, can you be creative anywhere? Yes. Yes, you can.
Of course you can. Well, we're going to be posing some of those questions. And Lee, thanks you're a gem in the complete sense of the word. Wow, exactly. So we're going to be talking about you being a gem in the complete sense of the world. We're also going to talk a little bit about how do you make good decisions. I mean, look, here are you working with some of the world's most precious jewels. And it's very difficult sometimes to make good decisions around those jewels. So we're going to explore that a little bit this evening with your permission. But most of all, I really want to hear about the stories of you going around the world, going to extreme places as you do, and finding that beauty, that eternal beauty, which is captured in these rocks that you then polish up, cut, or I should say cut first, then polish, then create into some piece of jewelry uniquely for your customers. So I'm looking forward to talking to all of those.
I am too. You know, one thing you have to remember is that I do like to go into mines when I can and so forth at different places around the world. It's fascinating to me, but I don't go into mines and just pull out gems and take them. I mean, these mines are owned by people. That's their asset. You know, you would be shot and killed if you would go in there and start taking things. And besides that too, you're talking about good decisions. If you were, 1,000 feet under the ground in a dark, damp environment that's very dusty and that you can't really see very well, would you be making a decision to purchase something that was tens of thousands of dollars? No, you have to take it out of the mind and take it, to a place where there's light, where you can look at more what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So look, we're going to talk about that process as well, because for those of us who are not experts in gems, we don't know that process. We don't know the process before it gets into the shop. We don't understand it. So we look and we see that ring or that earring or that necklace in a shop, in that shop window, beautifully lit, but we don't understand the journey behind it. When we go into a supermarket, we often look at the food and we don't understand the full process, but we look at a fish and we kind of know the fish came from the sea. So let's talk a little bit about that. Before we do that, though, I want to ask you one simple question, which is something I ask all of my guests when I have them on the show. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is really high, how creative are you feeling this evening, my time? It's 20 past 8 my time. And it's probably mid-afternoon your time in the US. So how creative are you feeling?
I'd probably say a 9, but I could get boosted up to a 10. For me, often people say, what do you have to do for creativity? But creativity is like breathing to me. It's, you can feel it around you. You can pull in ideas. For me, I have to, always be editing the ideas. It's not a problem having ideas. And then hearing you talk, Alex, about can you be creative anywhere? That boosted me up a bit. So I'd say very creative.
9. Awesome. Well, look, we're going to get you up to a 10 by the end of the show. That's my commitment. So look, you do so many different things. As I explained, you go off to the mines and you're finding the perfect jewels and you're taking it all the way through to the finished product for your client. What are the things you're most excited about that you're working on at the moment for yourself or for your clients?
Oh, I thought you were going to say just excited about. And what I get most excited about in my job is it's not the paperwork. You know, there's a pile of paperwork to do here too. You have to manage all these things, but it's finding the right gem for the right person. When I can hook up, it's almost like adoption or something, but when you can hook up the right gem, I'm getting chills thinking about it, for the right person that just makes their heart sing, that does something to them that enhances their life and makes them more connected to beauty and the earth's energy. That's my most enjoyable thing I do overall.
So talk to us about that. You have so many brilliant stories where you have connected this gem to this person. If you were to just pick out one story that you'd like to share today, what would that story be?
Oh dear, there's so many of them, and now I'm thinking about editing. Let me see if I have one behind me. Here's a star sapphire.
Wow.
Right now because you need to have a light. Like, I don't know if this will show. Will this show that it's a? I'm gonna stop that. But it's a 20 karat star sapphire from Sri Lanka. It has a perfect star on it. It's really rich blue. It's highly translucent when you shine a light behind it. There's no cracks, no fissures. The silk in it that makes the eye is really fine textured, not in glomps, and it's silver. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it takes a long time to find something like this. I mean, it has everything. It's not showing the star right now because you have to show a light on top of it to get the star, and the computer is limiting that. But this is for a graduation present for a daughter that's been
wow
school a long time. And so this is something that we searched for years, and that we've just found to be able to put into a ring. So that's really an exciting thing. And I love that family. So I know that this gemstone, that who we purchased it from in Sri Lanka, and all the hands that it came through, and then coming to me and her father, and then it will go to rest on her hand, and then her children and her children's children. And to me, that's, wow. I love genealogy and time travel. It's all of that encased in one gemstone. And then these sapphires from Sri Lanka are like 600, 800 million years old. And, you know, that's wonderful to hold something like that, you know, to pull it out of the ground, and you're the custodian. And that gem has been through much more than we have, and is going to last after us. And it puts our little worries in perspective too.
So talk us through, you know, this comes from Sri Lanka, this 20 karat blue sapphire, stunning. I mean, look, we can even see that. I can even see that without the light behind it. I mean, it's a beautiful rock. It really is. So talk us through, how did you find that in Sri Lanka? Is this a network you have?
Yes.
Do you go there? Talk us through the process. How do you find that 20 karat sapphire?
Well, it's a small world internationally. I've been doing this 26 years. So and I'm very well connected internationally. And I started to go to Sri Lanka in the mid 90s. And it was really funny. The first time I went to Sri Lanka, it was at a big gem symposium. And I was on the board of directors of the American Gem Trade Association. And through all of these comedy of errors, I became the chief guest of the island that day. And I wore a sari and gave a speech about the female consumer and the changing face of consumerism. And they had Reuters and the Herald Tribune. Anyway, I got all over the news media at that time. And I would get all these marriage proposals. And they would come up to me and say, you know, you look very much like Princess Diana. And I just got known. And then it's one thing to be known for being in a sari, saying you look like Princess Diana. But then, you know, my word comes through. When I buy something, it's paid for. There's not any drama, any problems with it. I'm professional. So this has been going on for some time. So, you know, you make really deep friendships. I mean, we will shake a hand, and, you know, somebody will send me a gem like that that's $200,000 on a handshake. And then we have to wire the funds, of course, and do a little due diligence. But it's a small network. It's probably like, could it be like the way actors are? You know, they're on set for a while and they get close. We might be like on location someplace, or trading here or there, and you get close and then you go back home. But the binds tie.
Now, look, that's a fascinating journey. So there you are doing a deal, which can be, you know, I know when it gets to the top end of you know, kind of gems that you deal with, that the numbers just go exponentially, right? I mean, you know, you get up to 20 carats, you're going very. So talk us through that process of you get a brief from a client. Now, when most people get a brief from a client, or not most people, but let's say you take a brief from a client in a business environment. Normally, you can pretty much deliver on that brief to the T, if it's like a business consulting or a business service. But here you are delivering a stone,
we sometimes will have to start years in advance. One necklace I made took 5 years to make. Because these are real rarities, genuine rarities, especially when you're dealing with the finer type things. There's not much of it. That's what makes it fine. It's rare. And so you will put the word, they'll tell me what they want and I'll slowly go about it. If I were to just then put the word out everywhere, then everybody would be chasing the same gem and it would be going from hands to hands to get to me and the price would go up. So you have to be quiet and make quiet inquiries. And it could take a while. You have to wait some time.
And how do you make that decision? So you're holding that sapphire, and I presume when you hold it for the first time, it hasn't been cut. It's still a rough sapphire. Is that correct? And you're taking it from the point when it's a rough sapphire, and you're choosing to cut it into that shape. Is that correct?
No.
Or do you sometimes
it comes to me cut because sapphire. The star sapphire is very complicated. You're dealing with, that's why it's so great for collectors, because there's so many nuances in it and so many things that could be screwed up to get it right. So that's why they're rare. But you're dealing with the body of the blue gem that has to be even colored and clean. And then you're dealing with the phenomenon of the star, which is another mineral that's interlaced with it, and light reacts differently with the sapphire or the rutile. That's the other mineral that forms the star. So I wouldn't just buy this from the rough for my client and say this is it, because it doesn't turn out very well very often. So you're much better in mitigating risk to buy a cut. Now sometimes we will recut it and refine it and so forth, but with these stars they're very, very tricky. So this is one that I would buy cut. There's other things that I would buy rough, but not this one.
So what would you if you were going to take something from rough all the way through, what kind of rocks, what kind of gems, colored gems would you buy and take all the way through the process?
Like the tourmalines, the aquamarines, they're long prismatic crystals. They're easier to do. The quartzes, amethyst and citrine. I've got a lot of rough of that too. Sunstone. What are some that you've heard of? Some garnets and so forth. But remember that fine things are so unusual. So you got to buy what you see, whether it's the rough that you could think you could cut. And then if you do cut it, it turns out you do have a higher profit margin. But really that makes up for all the times it didn't turn out, because you really can't control everything. It's not like fabric that, okay, I'm going to cut a black top and this will be done, because we have to deal with optics, the way light moves through, and that it moves through differently at different ways that it goes through the crystal. So it is very tricky.
So talk us, you just mentioned the word unusual there, and I'm figuring that you sometimes get some unusual briefs and some really interesting briefs. If you were to pick let's say the most interesting or unusual brief that you've ever had, could you talk us through that? Through that one?
Is brief, it's a language difference. Does brief mean a request?
Yeah, request. A client comes to you and says, this is what I need. So in where I used to work before I got into art, I used to work in communications, and a client would give me a brief and that says, this is what I want you to do. Can you deliver on it? A client will come to you, or a potential client will come to you, I'm guessing, and say, this is what I'm looking for. This is ideally what I would like, you to produce. So what's the most unusual kind of request you've had of that nature?
I'm just getting one that comes off the top of my head. I'm sure that if I thought about it after we hang up, I'd think of a lot that were really unusual too. But I had a client that came to me and he wanted to do a necklace of all beautiful blue sapphires from Sri Lanka, unheated. They all had to have a certain slightly violet blue color. They had to be a certain size, and then they all had to match. Now that's the thing that took 5 years, because if they say in Eskimo language, there's 100 words for the whiteness of snow, there must be 200 words then for the blues and sapphires, slightly violetish blue, bluish violet, something that's gray, something that's uneven color, pastel blue. There's so many different ones. And the texture, so they all have to match going around the neck. And that was a real trick for me. That took quite a bit to be able to find. And that's what took 5 years of going back to Sri Lanka and matching and so forth. But it was a lot of fun and really spiritual and mysterious. It was tremendous. And then another client came to me a few years ago, and they had this Rhodesian Ridgeback dog, beautiful dog, very noble and wild, you know, and they wanted a bust carved of him in some sort of mineral that would be, you know, a sculpture. So I've been working with these sculptors and gemstones in Germany. And so we took all sorts of pictures secretly of the dog, and we had to find the right kind of agate material that looks like this particular kind of dog and do his eyes just right. And so that was a real unusual request too, but it turned out beautifully.
Wow. So look, I'm joined this evening by Cynthia Rennie, the colored gem expert. Cynthia does everything from finding the stone all the way through to delivering, polishing that stone, designing that stone into the perfect piece of jewelry for you. Cynthia, a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned the word spiritual in terms of the search for a gem. Talk me through that process. I mean, you know, most of us associate gems, jewels with romance. We don't necessarily associate them with spirituality. Talk us through the kind of spiritual connection. And excuse me while my daughter comes up. She's a little upset.
I thought that was the computer. That's cute. I would love to meet your daughter.
You know, she's just under 2 years, so she's a little young. She's going into the shower, bless her. So apologies for that. That, you know, we understand the link between gems and romance. That's what, you know, De Beers and big marketing organizations like that try to associate gems with. But you talk about spirituality. Where does that connection come from for you?
Well, it's going to sound kind of woo-woo, as you know, we would say in California. My background is in science, you know, and maybe like many college students at that time, I was very agnostic. But over time, in fighting out my own faith, it's become very strong. To me, even though I know the science, gemstones are almost like living, breathing things that come with this energy with them and this feeling with them. And I have this, it's a neurological thing called synesthesia, which with different colors, I hear sound. So when I see different colors, I can hear these sounds that can be very exalting and very uplifting. I'm getting chills thinking about it. I only talked to a few people about this, but it's like a symphony. Like if you ever been in a church and the music uplifts you, well, these colors of gemstones do the same thing too. So when I was looking for that suite of the sapphires that I told you about, I would, at night, I was staying in this really old hotel, old colonial one, the Gullface Hotel in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And it's a creaky old place, and you could open the windows and the breeze would come in from the Indian Ocean and the full moon would be there. And I would sit there in my chair looking out, and I would close my eyes and I would imagine the gems, and I would get this feeling in my body of seeing these gems. And I would feel this happiness that my client got them, the happiness that it was good business for me and my client got them, and the happiness from the brokers I use, the people that mine them all on. And I would like bring this in. I haven't done it since either, but it was this massive thing. And in any case, I was able to source all these gemstones on one trip in December, one trip for just those, not for the diamonds and doing the necklace. That took 5 years. But it's like a connection of bringing in life and soul and spirit. If we would slow down enough, I think that most of us would be able to sense that. Like your 2-year-old daughter probably senses it all the time because she hasn't been edited. Maybe with you as a dad, she wouldn't be. But, you know, it gets smashed out of us. And, you know, we have our bills to pay each month. It can be tough. But
so
does that answer? You have any?
It does. And for me,
you know, I think,
it's not woo-woo at all for me, Cynthia. Really, it's not. You know, when I go up to the mountains, just to be clear, that is a spiritual journey for me. So, you know, when I go and paint, I am in an altered state, and the scenery around me is just flowing through me and onto the canvas. And it is my skill to interpret what I am seeing in a way that resonates That's one of my unique skills. Is that any different from Vincent van Gogh? Not an awful lot.
Exactly what you're meaning. When I design a story for a client and work in the right design for them, people want you to right away sketch what you could do and so forth. And I don't work that way. I have to get to know the client a little bit, and I get a feeling from them. And then when I'm washing the dishes or driving the kids to school, it's like these images for the jewel start downloading in my mind. And it comes out, and then it comes through my hands. But it has a pattern it goes through. If you want resonant jewelry design, which is what I call it too, resonant jewelry design. If someone just wants a ring, sure, you could do a ring really easily. But if you want something that really reflects the individual who's wearing it, it does have to take a little simmering on the stove, and waiting for that to connect. I love that connection between soul and gem. So individual and gem.
Yeah, I often say that a painting has an energy to it. A piece of art has an energy to it. It resonates in a certain way. Talk us through that because jewelry is art. For me, jewelry is art. It is a form of art, and what you're creating is art. And your skill is clearly to match the jewel with your client, and that is art as well. Talk me through that energy that you talked about, that resonant jewels that you are creating and you are providing for your clients. How does that work for you?
I don't tell most of the clients about it. Certainly not.
Just told me about it.
Yeah. But some of the other female clients I've been working for a long time, they know. You asked me how it works for me?
Yeah.
It's not something that I can happen. It's just something that's always there, like breathing. Or like, do you have this experience where your hands feel energy of stuff? You can sense somebody, you can vibe with them. And usually, thank heavens, I find something to like about everybody. If it's somebody that I don't have that in sync with, the business is not going to work. And I've learned I have to just let that go and help them find somebody else. But I always like people, and I'm curious about them. And I'm really curious about, their ancestors that came before them. What are their interests? What do they do? What are their, for some reason, I'm just blessed with being able to connect with people. And then it just comes through. I used to meditate all the time before I had kids. Now I don't, but it's just there all the time.
Vincent van Gogh said, "I paint with my heart and soul, and in the process, I've lost my mind." And that to me is a very powerful statement. Now, what you're saying is that when you have a stone in your hand, a colored gem in your hand, that has a certain energy, if I understand you correctly. Does it talk to you? Does it give you clues as to how to use it? I mean, for instance, if you were to hold that 20-carat sapphire that you showed us earlier, what does that tell you? When you hold it, what do you feel when you hold that stone?
I feel white and smooth and gleaming. So a white metal and something that's smooth and not a bunch of stuff all over it, diamonds all around it, just something that's sleek so it can be offered up itself to the wearer and to the world so that nothing conflicts with it or fights with it. There's a saying, and I can't remember who said it. It's not Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius, but beauty inspires the soul to act. And that's what I feel like I do with my clients in my business, is that I bring them beauty in the form of the earth treasures, which are rare and remarkable and will, endure before us and much after. And, you're taking part of the cosmos and concentrating it into a gem that somebody can enjoy. And that's what I do. I think that what I do speaks to the person's soul. And some of my clients, they say too that, they open up in ways that they didn't know they had.
Isn't that interesting? So, if I understand you correctly, the impact of wearing a ring, the impact of wearing a necklace opens something up at a soul level.
I think it does, yes. Now, my clients, like some of the things I've done, are very expensive. And this isn't just like in the rock hobby shop, people, which is where I shop too, but $5, $10, it works the whole demographics, the whole spectrum for a certain type of person that's sensitive. And the sensitivity doesn't know any, economic boundaries one way or another. And that thing that's beautiful that can open, it could be $100,000 thing, or it could be a $10 thing. Beauty is beauty. It's not the rarity. The rarity in the gem is something else, but beauty is beauty.
So I'm talking this evening my time, to Cynthia Rennie, who is the gem expert. We've been talking about so many different things: where the stones come from, how to source the stones, how to make decisions about them. And we've now just started to touch on the spiritual, the energetic aspect of gems, something that I'd never even considered. Let's talk about, let's go right back to the beginning for a second. Cynthia, how did you get into gems in the first place? How did you get into jewelry and colored gemstones? What drove you? What inspired you to start out on this journey?
Well, my grandmother was an unusual woman, and she was looking at the globe with me one day, and I was saying, hey, look, it looks like South America could nestle into Africa, and we could put all the continents together in one. And we were talking about ecology, which was a big thing, like in the 70s, it was the new thing. And she told me I could be an ecologist and so forth. And so that interested me, but I was more interested in adventure. I didn't really dream of like getting married or having vast riches. I wanted adventure. When I was a kid in middle school, I would get teased for reading what they called boys' books then, adventure books. And that's what I wanted. And I was always pulled to why there was a mountain here, why there's a valley here, why is that rock spotted and this one red? So when I went to school, I was kind of a lost kid in high school and so forth, not a real great achiever. People didn't really expect that much of me in the way of teachers. But I went to school, I took a basic geology class, and then went on the field trips out in Southern California where there's a lot of vastness, but it just lit something in me. It lit something in me. This is it. I needed to know the Earth's, the answers to the Earth's riddles, why everything was there. And then when I went through school, I worked through school. I got a job as a secretary to a company that did gemstone mining, wholesaling, retailing. They sold things like to the Smithsonian or the Sorbonne. And they did gemstone cutting and mine, so I got a big, introduction there. And by the time I got out of school, I didn't want to work for an oil company. I wanted to do the gemstones because I saw that as a way to be able to marry my main interests, which were geology, cultures, beauty and design, and adventure. And that has worked out. Sometimes better than others, but it does work out.
So it was written in your destiny from the beginning, and you just picked up and just flowed it through.
Yeah.
Say again?
Yeah. I was looking at some remarks that a third grade teacher made for me about a year ago. And she said, I lived in California then, Cynthia loves our great state, California. It's hills and valleys. So, and I thought, oh, even in third grade, I didn't remember that, but it's true.
Wow. It's amazing, isn't it? When you look back at those school reports from third grade and you see some truths there about who you are. It's interesting. It was Pablo Picasso who said every child is born an artist. The problem is remaining one as he grows up. Now, for me, artist, it's not just somebody who stands in front of a canvas. It's somebody like you who's crafting something into a piece of art. But it can also be somebody in business, somebody working with numbers, somebody doing presentations. All of those people are artists.
I think so too. Because I have to be creative in all the other aspects of my work too. It's not just, I don't spend all day gems and jewelry. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork and planning and marketing.
So talk us through that. What role does creativity play in your work on a daily basis?
I'm kind of regimented. I'm a single mom. And so there's a lot for me to do. My kids are almost 12 and 14. So there's a lot to do. So I have to be very effective. So I plan my days very well, and certain days are for certain things. So I have design days that I do just designs and so forth, and marketing days and so forth. But is everything creative? I guess that's the way I just view life, Alex. What do you find it? I mean, is it creative when I'm inputting bookkeeping things? Well, it can be if you start figuring out how to understand it and interpret that. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I used to always think somebody should write mystery novels, chart with a forensic accountant, and they could make accountants sexy, if they were mystery solvers. Making marketing things, even creatively solving problems, cash flow creativity. I mean, it's everything. I guess I've never felt, and this was partly my parents, that I had to do what everybody else thought you had to do. You know, people say think outside the box. I think we've always been doing that. It's my parents were able to raise, 6 kids who felt very free to live the life they wanted to live instead of follow a certain way. So I probably just bred to be that way.
Yeah, and look, I totally get that. For me, creativity is a lifestyle. It's not something that you do one moment and you stop another moment. Right. It's something you choose to do. And for me, creativity is how you express your unique talents, your unique gifts. And clearly you found your unique gift, your unique talent relatively quickly. Some people take years, decades to find their unique gift, their unique talent. And even then struggle to understand really what it is. And some people go their whole life without fully realizing their full potential, what their unique gift is. So for me, creativity is, it's a way of being. And the most powerful people in whatever society you talk about are often the most creative people. For me, one of the most extraordinary artists in our generation is Steve Jobs. Bless his soul.
I was thinking about
no longer with us.
That, yeah.
But, he's somebody who had a unique gift and he manifested something, happened to be a computer, which I happen to be using now to speak to you. And, he revolutionized 6 industries in the process of producing something which was partly creative. Now, you talk about there being other aspects of the business. There's numbers as well. Well, I remember I was speaking to, he was the former head of the White House research. So he's the director of research at the White House for the senior George Bush. And he said to me, Alex, this was a few years ago, he said to me, Alex, research is made up of 3 components. The logistics, you have to get people in the room to do the research. The science, you have to understand how to ask the best questions and how to set it up in a way to get the answers. And it's also art, because you have to be able to interpret those answers in a way that makes sense. And that always resonated with me. And let me ask it back as a question, because it's something I've pondered for a while. If you look at your business, do you see that part of it is logistics, part of it is science, and part of it is art?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's a very good way to think of it. And those ratios and proportions change according to what's going on. But yes, definitely is. And I was thinking about, even if I was doing something tedious, working on a spreadsheet or something, I could look at like a shadow. I'll notice a shadow that passes by that's an interesting form or just beautiful, or the tree outside, or my dog might come over and look at the angle of his hair. The ability to see beauty, and I don't even try to see beauty. Once I had a really bad romantic breakup in the 90s, really bad. It was awful. But what brought me back was that I would start to notice like glimpses of beauty, 15 seconds beauty. Look at that bird, look at that leaf, look at the angle, and it would start happening more and more. And I think seeing beauty is just the whole key to everything in life, to a satisfying life. You can withstand anything if you are able to see beauty. It can even be a beauty in a bitter cup of tea, but it's great beauty. I
would totally agree with you. For me, beauty is key. And, I know a lot of artists who focus on the antithesis of beauty because they believe that communicates more powerfully. I have chosen a different path, which is about communicating beauty. But how do you, when somebody comes to you and they don't see that, how do you talk to them? And how do you remind them the importance of beauty, both in jewelry? There are big challenges all around the world. I live in France now. I happen to be British, but I live in France. Not a million miles away from Paris. And you think about the events there. The Middle East is not so far from here either. It's a 4-hour flight, and we know that there's enormous conflict there. So how do you see beauty even in those moments, even in the darkest kind of moments? Do you still see beauty there, do you think?
Well, I haven't been through anything like what's happened in Paris or what happened to the Jews in World War II or Civil War. I mean, I haven't experienced that kind of hardship, but I think about it a lot. And what I say, kind of prayer I say to myself, is that I hope I go with grace. I just hope I go with grace, because it's easy to say you're going to act a certain way, but until you're there, do you really know? I don't think you really do know what you're going to do or how you're going to experience things. I mean, I was very interested in reading like Viktor Frankl and stuff during a certain period of time, and a lot of accounts of survivors of concentration camps and children of the survivors and so forth. I was very interested in that. Like, how does one get through hardship? Would I be brave enough to be able to do that? There was a while in my 30s where I would put myself in hardship's way to really kind of hone myself and see what it was, what I made of. I think that I would react rather strongly to anybody trying to overtake me or those I love or stand up for other people. But do you really know till you're there? And isn't beauty, I saw a bird outside a fence. Doesn't beauty do something? You don't want to lose that sense. But if I was fighting for my children's life, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I don't know if I would cut back. I mean, I know what I do for my children, but I don't know if you would cut back and just see one. I don't know. Do you? What do you think?
I don't know. It's a really fascinating question. One of the things that drove me for many years was a phrase, the beauty of life. And, what I was searching for constantly was the beauty in life. And the point you make there that, some of the most extraordinary people, and I think of, the Holocaust survivors, a woman of 80 who survived the Holocaust, an extraordinary, inspirational woman. And despite it all, she just continued to give love. That was all she gave. She just gave love, love, love. Take a more well-known example, Nelson Mandela. He was in jail for 27 years. 27 years. I can't even get my head around 27 years. That is such a long time to be in jail. And he comes out, and he doesn't come out and blame the people who put him in. And he doesn't come out and change the people who put him in. He doesn't do any of that. He comes out, and all he gives is love. Now, most of those 27 years, or a significant part of those 27 years, he was on his own. So inside, he goes deeper inside himself. And what does he find? In all that hardship, in all that isolation, he finds love. And he finds such love that when he comes out, what does he share? He shares love. And he shares love not just for black people, he shares love for white people. He shares love for the Indians in South Africa. He shares love for every race in South Africa. And as a result, he transforms the whole country. Not only does he transform a country, but he transforms a perception in the world about what a single person can do. Now that, in the face of hardship, to me is utterly inspirational. I know a lot of people talk about Nelson Mandela, but I find enormous inspiration in that story. Does that resonate with you?
Well, it does. I was just reading a quote, that quote that he has, like, when he left the prison gates, he knew that if he didn't leave hate and just go forward in love, he would be still in prison for the rest of his life. And I did stop and think, I wonder if I could do that. Would I do that? Again, you can only speculate. I'm not one that really spends a lot of energy on holding grudges and so forth. You just have to let stuff go and be free, because free is my big, I want freedom. So, you don't want to be kept captive by grudges. I think you're right. I think it's tremendous. And beauty is part of that.
I think it is. It's
beauty is not superfluous.
Say again?
Beauty is not superfluous. Beauty is needed, whether it's the beauty of flowers, which I think of gemstones as flowers that last forever, or gems, or a painting, or fabrics. I mean, there's just, the beauty in your child's eyes, all those things.
All those things, all of the above. So look, in the last 15 minutes or so, and I know we started late, I'd love to explore a few more thoughts with you. So I'm speaking to Cynthia Rennie today, who is the gem expert. We've been talking about so many different things, where diamonds come from, the beauty in diamonds, spirituality, sorry, not in diamonds, in gems, in colored gems. Talk to me, I've kind of pre-warned my next question. We just talked about freedom there, and we talked about the beauty that can come through from any moment. Even in the harshest moment, you can find beauty. And you talked about freedom. And we know that over the last 10 to 15 years, many stories have come to light of mines, particularly in Southern Africa, where there hasn't been freedom, where there has been coercion and exertion. Because guess what? When you have something of real value, then you often have conflict. And we hear specifically about conflict diamonds. We hear about blood diamonds. I know that's not your specific area of expertise, but I'm sure that to some extent that reputation spills over a little bit into, the colored gems as well. So how do you ensure that your gems, the jewels that you are sourcing, are coming from sources which are, you can put your hand on your heart, your hand on your soul, and say, you know what, I know that these are coming from people who are putting their heart and soul into this, and it isn't coming from a conflict zone. How do you do that?
Well, diamonds are very different than colored gemstones. Diamonds are one thing, and they're pretty commoditized. They're anywhere in the world, you're going to pay roughly the same kind of price for a diamond of a certain size and color and clarity and so forth. There's a grading scale for them. With colored gemstones, there must be, at least 10. Let's say at least 10 major types of colored gemstones. And each one of them have their own market. And then each one, like somebody can't corner the market, because there might be, say, rhodolite garnet. You're going to have to go to corner the market, Brazil and India and Tanzania, a variety of places. So what colored gemstone mining is primarily is artisanal. There's people that are small groups of people, families and so forth. And that's where I buy mine. That's why I'm able to go out to mine sites and so forth. And who's operating it, who's making the money, and you're buying from families. And people make a big mistake, I think, like with the Burmese embargoes and so forth on certain gemstones. It's families that were impacted by that. It's individuals that are impacted by that, while they still sell strategic minerals from those areas, or things that go into computers or Apple computers and so forth, because that's what the people don't quite know about. So for me, it's buying small scale. I don't sell, what would you call it, mass market. Everything's individual. All my gemstones, can you see them back there? They're individual on a tray. There's not a big mound of them. So I'm able to know where they come from and how we source them. Now, if somebody could always say, yes, everybody has been treated extremely well with this gemstone. There's a big movement for that, with companies registering for responsible jewelry sourcing and so forth. But I think in a lot of times with things, it's a marketing thing. It's a marketing gimmick. They really don't understand the supply side, what happens on the ground with the artisanal miners. It's bigger firms that want to be able to use that as something that pats them on the back for marketing and makes particularly the millennials feel good about the gemstone they're purchasing. I think you have to deal with the individual, not with large chains, and that way you're able to get more clear sourcing.
Fascinating. So what I understand, you can
see my dog.
I can. Not only can I see your gemstones, but I can see your dog. So it's all going on this evening, Cynthia. So you're talking to me, and you're saying that the industry which you operate is an industry where it is very artisanal. It is very kind of small. And yet at the same time, you're also saying that a stone can be, $200,000 and upwards. So how is it that it's remained kind of small, families who own these mines, while there is enormous value? How has that not been exploited in some way? Well,
probably, I suppose there are times that it does happen. But if you take a gemstone, where did it go? The star sapphire and so forth. I mean, the person who mines this sells it usually to either to a cutter who would cut it, or else the person who mines it has enough behind them to be able to cut it themselves. And then they see what it's like. And then they can determine the real value, because they could tell what kind of quality it is after it's cut. And from there, it might go from somebody to me who would buy it directly from them. And I don't make the kind of markups that people think that you make in the jewelry industry, or like they do in the art market and so forth. I mean, it takes a lot of money to buy and sell these things. And so you need to turn them and buy them. And you do that with a lower price, or they would sell it to, or they would take it to a broker. And I might sit in at somebody's office in Sri Lanka, and all these people line up, and we offer to whether we're going to buy something, buy and sell it and so forth. So it's face to face for the most part. It's not like you're taking something from a faceless person that you don't have any connection to. And I think part of business too is that I need my suppliers and the people that, say my jewelers, everybody that works for me, I need them all to be successful. Not just because I'm good and I want them to be successful, but that it's good for my business if my suppliers are strong and successful. And also, since this internet, I mean, they have internet in rural Sri Lanka. You can look on the internet and they see prices. And a lot of times they, misinterpret. They think what they have is the same quality as what's here. I mean, there's some problems with that, with opacity with quality and so forth. But, there's a lot of information around. Everybody has a cell phone.
Sure. So let's, in the last couple of minutes, talk a little bit about something we talked about a little earlier, which is how do you make decisions, right? So you are dealing in a high risk potential business because, as you said to me, these are extremely valuable pieces. The margins are potentially low. So how do you make sure? And you also said that you have to be an expert in multiple different categories. It's not like diamonds where, as you said, it's relatively speaking being commoditized. As a colored gem expert, you have to understand all of the different gems and all of those different markets. So how do you make these decisions where one poor decision could, you could end up investing an enormous amount of money in something which proves not to be as valuable as you thought it was? So what's the process you go through to make those type of decisions?
Well, you're always thinking of how you can mitigate risk. And so it's not just those particular markets that you're thinking about. There's also enhancements for each of the different types of gemstones. And some enhancements might be considered typical, like, say, blue sapphires, not the star sapphire, but blue sapphires since Marco Polo's times have been heated to help with the clarity and evenness of the color. And that's something that's very acceptable, though it needs to be disclosed to the consumer. It's very rare to find a sapphire that's not heated, but there's other treatments that are fraudulent and misrepresented. If you buy it knowing that that's the treatment, okay. But if I were to buy something, a ruby, and not know that really its inclusions have been filled with a red polymer, that's a problem. So we would take the gemstones and get a few different opinions from different gemological labs. Now that's also problematic too, because different labs give different gradings. They give different color systems. The labs need the auction houses in order to maintain their market. And so sometimes they're influenced by the auction houses. And so how do you find a good lab, a lab that's not in the make and that has ethics and is able to see a backlog of material over a long period of time, decades, to be able to make decisions as to what's happening in the market. So you have to do due diligence that way. You have to check on the science of the gemstone, the enhancements of the gemstone, and then the people who are checking those things too. I can't just do it myself anymore. It's too complicated. So I wouldn't just buy a stone like this. I would make sure I buy it pending a cert, which means pending certification from probably 2 labs, and see what they would find inside it by doing, all sorts of molecular tests on it.
So let me ask you a question that I've asked of hundreds of people all over the world. And it's about how you actually make the final decision. Because, we do all this research, and it's not just with buying gems, but gems are a potentially high risk, as you say, and so you go through all this research. But let's talk about the moment that you actually make the decision. After you've done all of that research, and after you have, analyzed pros and cons, are you making that decision with your intellect, with your analytical part of you, or are you making with your intuition, your more kind of creative part of you? Is it an intellectual decision or an intuitive decision?
Oh, you have to marry both of those things. I think that's where my scientific background, that could be a little cold and hard and critical, really combines with the artistic background. I never fall in love with the stone until the end. So I purposely keep a distance from it. If it's a big stone, not if I'm buying $100 stone, but I keep a distance from it. I don't fall in love with it. And if I'm buying a stone for a client, like if they're trusting me to spend their money somewhere, because you have to act fast, you got to spend the money then I really don't fall in love with it. And sometimes they'll say to me, well, do you like the stone? And it's, yes, everything is there, but I'm not falling in love with it at this point. And then we have to make sure that you do the due diligence and that the due diligence checks out. It always amazes me how these captains of industry, male or female, they're used to making, doing a lot of due diligence with finance and so forth. And then it goes out the window if they're bidding at auction or buying something expensive and pretty. You still have to do a lot of due diligence here. So when we get to that point and it all checks out and I know the stone is right, then I could exhale and say, yes, this is it. And then I wait till I bring it to them and show it to them. And if they, I want to see the expression on their face, because what if I think everything's there and they've just seen it by the computer and they see it in real life, and I always think, oh, what if they didn't like it? I haven't had that yet, but it's nerve-wracking. And I'm always more careful spending my clients' money than making a decision for myself.
Of course. And so I'm fascinated by that, because, if I were to rephrase that question and say, think about the best decisions you've ever made in terms of buying colored gems. So think about, let's say, the 3 best decisions you've ever made. And after you've done all that due diligence, you've done all that research, and you come to the point where you say, buy, don't buy. Is that then an intuitive decision, or is that still a partly intellectual analytical decision?
That's where you have to really, that's where my experience of, I've had my business 26 years, and then I worked in it 5 years before with somebody else. And that's where you just, if I was younger at this or newer at this, you kind of start to question your intuition, like, oh, is it right? And now I would say, don't do it. It's not for you. It's not for you. Because there are things we walked away from, but just something will seem fishy with the deal and you can't quite put your finger on it. No. And you know what? They always turn out to be right.
They do somehow, don't they? They do. Yeah. I mean, so the reason I asked the question is because I'm fascinated by this question. And I asked business leaders the question, and it turns out that 90%, 95% of people, when you ask the question, will say that they use their intuition. The final thing they use always, there's a leap of faith, a leap of intuition. And that to me is, by the way, where creativity comes from. And, I could ask the question in a different way, that when you are doing, the creative process and you're looking at a rock and saying, can this work? Can we use this to create something? Then at that point, you may say, you may be more creative. That's a more intuitive process. But I certainly know when I go up into the mountains that I am tapping into my intuition. And it's the only way to create something when it's, 20 degrees Fahrenheit or, 50 mile an hour winds. It is not possible. Yeah.
I used to be an alpinist in my early 30s, but boy, I didn't try to paint.
Yeah, no, that's what I do. I go to extreme places all over the world to do exactly that, and to see what's required, what is required in those extremes to still be creative. Because I believe that, creativity, you need to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges. We've just talked a little bit about, what's happened in the diamond industry, and, there's some ethics going on there, the whole blood diamond thing. But there's a bigger picture in that, which is, what is the impact in terms of people? What is the impact in terms of climate? When you have big mines, we haven't touched on that at all. And a lot of the work I do with some of the international organizations based in Geneva, the UN, World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, UNICEF, these sorts of organizations, the Red Cross, are, they're dealing with those big issues. They're dealing with conflict. And conflict comes out of fighting over a raw material, a resource, or a piece of land. But that land often has a resource in it. What's the war in Ukraine over? Well, you could say it's over the minerals in eastern Ukraine. You could say it's over the food in Ukraine, but it's over resources. What's the war in the Middle East? What's the war in Syria about? Is that about minerals? Probably not about minerals, but it is over resources, people. And what were the attacks in Paris probably over? Probably over trying to block people from leaving. So the whole immigration thing, the whole kind of refugee thing, which is a big issue. And what does it come back to? It comes back to owning something. So here we are talking about gems, which is such a beautiful subject to be talking about, and yet somehow they are everything is linked. Let's put it that way. Everything is linked. So in the last couple of minutes, and I'm aware that we're running over, but we certainly started a little bit late. I'd love to hear from you. If there was one piece of advice you were to give, a potential client, we're just here before Christmas, the run up to Christmas. And I know in North America, you've just had Thanksgiving, but many people go out and they buy gems at this time of year, colored gems, they might buy a ring, they may buy a necklace, they may buy something for their partner, for their loved one. And let me welcome Fabienne and David to the show. Great to have you here. What advice would you be giving those people about the decisions that they're about to make as they buy that gift?
That's a wide one. That's a very wide one. But you have to use both things here. So first, remember how I said I don't fall in love with a gemstone before I actually pull the trigger on buying it? It needs to be a piece of jewelry that really speaks to the person who's going to be wearing it, that says something if it's a gift between the gift takers, or if a woman, it's usually a woman, is buying it for herself, that has meaning for her, isn't just like what I call price tag jewelry. You might as well put a price tag on each ear because it's really not beautiful. It's just something that's blingy. So it has to have meaning, and it has to be beautiful. It has to be something you want. Now, on top of that, when you are able to purchase it, you need to have what's written on the receipt to be whether the gemstone has been enhanced in any type. If they've given you any information on the gemstone or the piece of jewelry when they're talking to you about it in a store or something, it needs to be on the receipt, you know, like this came from a certain place. Any sort of guarantees that you make sure that it's on the receipt. You can pay with an American Express card and it's easier to return, but make sure that it's somebody that you trust. So if it's somebody that's linked in the community, somebody that has to understand the colored gemstone market, which is different from just understanding the diamond market or the jewelry market, but somebody who understands that. A lot of my clients come from all over the world and we deal because I understand the colored market. And there was one last thing. If you're buying it from someplace where you don't trust the person, or you're on a cruise somewhere and you don't know, my number one advice is don't spend more than you can afford to lose. So it's a romantic thing to be able to go to a different country and you want to buy a souvenir. I do that too, not with gemstones, but with other things, art or antiques, so to speak, antiques. But just don't spend more than you can afford to lose. And that's very different for each person. You know, some person it might be $50 or $500 or $5,000. You know, that's it.
That's great advice. So, you know, what I hear there is make sure it has meaning. First of all, ensure it has meaning for you. And in other words, understand why you're going to buy it. And then make sure that, you know, if you, as far as you can, look into the process and make sure that it's authentic, you know, that what you're buying is genuine.
And then document on the receipt.
Then think about, document it and buy it with Amex if you can, because you can take it back. And then ensure that there we are.
I don't take Amex. Yeah.
and then make sure that, you know, when you do buy it, that, you know, it's a risk that you're willing to take, that, you know, you are willing to lose that amount. Now, look, we're coming to the end of the year, Cynthia, and we're coming to the end of the show as well. And it's been a genuine privilege talking to you about colored gems and how you make decisions. We talked about everything from spirituality to the source of gems, the link between spirituality and colored gems, you know, some of your best stories of where they come from. But as we come to the end of the year, I'm just really intrigued to hear from you. You know, what my kind of last question here, which is, what are you planning next year? What are you most excited about in 2016 that you're going to be doing next year?
I'm excited about designing a line of jewelry with my 14-year-old daughter, who has really good style. And she's tends to be kind of classic, but still youthful. So I want to bring her in and design a line that's like a mid-price line that people my age would still like to wear and people her age would still like to wear. That would be classic yet relevant and energetic. I'm excited about that. And I'm actually excited about this. It's really dweeby, but I'm excited about doing sales forecasting for the year, for breaking down all the different categories of products I have and then putting them on a calendar and seeing what sells during what time of year and how that's going. I haven't done that before. And actually, I'm excited about that.
Wow. Well, look, I'm excited for you. I don't think I've ever quite got excited about sales forecasting before, but I'm inspired having listened to you. And I'm certainly inspired by the idea of working with your 14-year-old daughter to look at a new line of jewelry. And it's extraordinary, isn't it? What young people can bring and a different perspective that they can bring, a different eye, a different approach, a different view on the world. So I'm very grateful for you joining us, and I wish you all the best.
You too and your family.
Thank you. And it's been a genuine pleasure. We'll go off air in a second and then we can chat informally. But let me wrap up now. And thank you so much for joining us. So my guest today has been Cynthia Rennie, the colored gem expert, who joins us from North America, where she's been talking to us about gems, how to buy gems, how to make better decisions, particularly around high value products. If you missed the show, feel free to watch the replay. My name's Alex Inchbald. You've been watching the Break Free Creativity Show. I'm an extreme artist. I paint in extreme locations all over the world and a creative mentor working with some of the leading companies and leaders in the world. If you'd like to know more about me or find out a little bit more about how to tap into your own creativity, pop into my website, alexinchbald.com. You can find the URL in my profile. And from there, you can download a free ebook, which is 11 ways to unleash break-free creativity. Thanks for watching, and see you next time when we'll be inviting another entrepreneur onto the show to talk about how creativity and breakthroughs impact their business. See you then.